Here. Warren, you want me to take
Yep.
roll?
Yep, take roll, please.
I see Giebert, West, Shaw, Kenor, Nairo, and Bachhuber. We know Wilkinson is missing.
First item of business then is approval of minutes from December.
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Actually, I had a correction too.
Okay,
It's just that item 5 minutes should indicate that the Spring Hill Basin was the subject of the first motion and vote, and Middleton Hill Southeast Basin was the second.
It's actually true. It was a little confusing.
South of Bacon and
so we have to have a motion for approval of that amendment.
Actually, the chair can accept the minutes with the correction without a vote.
I accept it.
So you just clarifying the first vote was for Spring Hill and the second was for, it's the other
In
way
item
around.
5.
Yes.
First vote was Middleton Hills.
Okay,
Because I made that one.
then I motioned for the,
No, the
Contract.
first one for mentioning the Ziegler Farm subdivision, that's the Spring Hill Basin.
No.
yes, it is, yeah.
Yeah, so you just want preliminary plans for Spring Hill Basin
Yep.
inserted and,
Okay, I was
Middleton
doing
Hills
Middleton
Basin.
Hills. So maybe the
Yep.
order's gotten switched because I asked for the trees for Middleton Hills.
yep. We got it. The order is correct. You're just not seeing on the page above, perhaps.
Okay. Okay, I see.
Got it.
Okay, and number
Most controversy we're gonna have tonight, okay.
2 is all in favor of approval,
Yeah,
Aye.
Chelsea.
opposed, and I abstained because I wasn't here. So the first item of business then is city ordinance chapter 26 revisions regarding fees in lieu. Do you want me to introduce that, Eric, what we're going to talk about?
Yeah.
Well, Matt Fleming, city attorney, is here to talk about this revision. You want
Can I make one comment to start with and just on the overall thing about fees in lieu of, it's been our policy all along since I can remember in 50 years when we accepted fees in lieu of, it was not, it was for anywhere in the basin to be applied. And so that was our general understanding of the ordinance. Looking back over again, and today in detail, I found that paragraph where it talks about downstream. You know, when we first did fees in lieu of, it include all phases of the water resources for like flood peaks. And it makes sense for flood peaks to do it downstream, produce a flood. So I think that's one part
Well, logic.
that never got revised. But if you think about infiltration and where it should go, infiltration is really meant to replenish the groundwater supply in the base flow of the streams and reduce the volume. So that should go anywhere in the basin where you could get the best infiltration and reduce the base flow, like our one behind the city hall. There is very good sand areas like that really do a good job of increasing the base flow in Pheasant Branch, which is not a good base flow stream. So that's valuable. So I think why we use that criteria is to put it in a basin where it can do the most good for infiltration. Flood peaks should be downstream because they have a direct bearing on it. So that's just my take of what we've been doing over the past 50 years.
When did we first get fees in lieu of? When was that instituted?
Well, I think almost, it wasn't 50 years ago because our first task was to develop the ordinance and that took a long time. So it's probably been 40 years since we had the ordinance, but, and I think fees in lieu was in there right from the start.
And when were
But
the fees
we didn't-
set?
Then there were a lot of changes. It went to the county and the county inserted things. And so I don't know if that got inserted by the county for compliance.
The fees in lieu?
Well, not the fees in lieu of, but that section about being downstream.
Okay.
That was probably added by compliance, and that wasn't us that did that. Someone else changed the ordinance, and why got overlooked by us over all these years, I don't know.
And most of our fees in lieu of are usually infiltration related, not peak flow. by league.
Since I've been here, they've all been just infiltration and recharge.
We used to, we used to have some large ones for peak flow though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
They were more significant and we were accumulating a lot more funds than we are now.
okay.
When was the last time you actually evaluated the amount of the fees?
yeah. This is on the docket for discussion and we're not there yet, but I think Eric Thompson did an evaluation, and that's Eric Thompson with MSA sitting over there. That was probably
Yeah.
2018, maybe, Eric? It was a while back, yeah.
Did they
But I don't
actually
think-
change them?
Water Resources Committee changed anything at that time.
And the ordinance is not setting the fee process.
No, that's
The
not
amount of
what we're
fee.
talking about tonight.
So
Yeah,
just,
I'm just trying to get some background information, so.
Yeah.
Since I'm not an engineer, that I understand it.
but just to clarify, so we started discussing the stormwater ordinance in December, specific and fees in lieu too. But tonight, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this one particular recommended change from our city attorney, correct?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, and so, this is an ordinance, I know since I've been working with the city, which is pretty long time now, I know we've done a few different revisions, but, as you all aware, this is a fairly technical ordinance, so to get everything right requires not just a lawyer looking at it, but you need to perfectly marry the engineering knowledge with the legal knowledge, and as you can imagine, especially if you do major revisions,
That's
those
why I'm trying to
two might not always connect perfectly.
that's why I'm trying to get some big picture
Sure.
things, because I sort of feel like looking at little tiny pieces, we're not gonna make a good decision.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think that this is a fairly insular change, although, I mean, so some of these other things with the amendment as drafted, will get rid of really being allowed to have fees in lieu for a lot of these other things, because it has not been recently the practice to allow people to essentially pay out of the peak flow rate, control runoff volume, and those kind of things. We have been requiring that. But for the infiltration in particular was where I found the legal concern. Because in talking with Eric, that really, partially for some of the reasons that were explained, in his initial comments, but also just because there really, from my understanding of America, there really aren't any or many, if any, lands within the city where you would be able to send water downstream for infiltration. It just can't happen.
Yeah.
And so because of that, that creates a problem, obviously just a practical problem for allowing any development in the city, but also under my email, 281-33, parent 3, 3M require our ordinance, this is, and the statute requires our ordinance to be in strict conformity with statutes and related and our regulations. And this is not something that's found in it. Actually, our fee in lieu program really isn't. Our justification for that, though, is it does allow us to do some different things, in part if it's necessary to comply with federal TMDL requirements. So, I mean, that's, I think, kind of the hat where we're hanging our hat to have the fee in lieu program, but to have this requirement that also that any infiltration measures be downstream for any particular development, it doesn't actually serve that purpose. And if it's not serving that purpose, we can't rely upon that as an exception. So it creates not just a practical problem with allowing development, it also creates a legal problem.
Yeah.
So that's why, after this has all come up and I've had a chance to, again, marry the legal knowledge with the practical engineering knowledge for how this actually works, concluded that really we can't continue to have this downstream requirement in the ordinance if it is not serving this reduction of TMDL or meeting the federal TMDL standards.
I'm confused on that point,
Yeah.
Matt, because the infiltration is tangentially maybe related to a TMDL requirement, pollution control.
Yes,
But we still have the pollution control aspect in here, and that's not being changed. That's, matter of fact, we're probably making it more rigorous maybe because you don't allow a
Yeah.
VLUA for pollution control.
right.
So I'm not clear why the volume, I understand from a technical point of view, trying to get downstream infiltration after you've designed a site plan and got discharged to a storm sewer most likely, or to some conveyance system, it's pretty tough to get that water out and infiltrated somewhere from a physical, technical point of view. Huh?
In Middleton.
And anywhere, and once you get the water confined to a channel, now you want to dig it out of the channel and try and infiltrate it. That's a very unusual type of thing to try to do. So I understand that part.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're hanging our hat on the TMDL connection, but that's.
Well, as I'm looking at this, I mean, that's what I understood sort of be this. I didn't go into this looking to eliminate the fee and lieu program.
Right.
I began looking at this because of this specific downstream issue that got raised, and so that's mainly what the legal concern behind this is to not have a provision in our ordinance that, one, can't really be met, two, is not in strict compliance with the statutes, and three, can't even arguably be justified by one of the exceptions to be more restrictive. So,
Got a backup question on this because I'm not as familiar with all of it. Since we're one of the only few cities that even has it, what is the advantage to us of having fees in lieu of?
It gives
The
us
whole-
I'll answer that. Richard, Ken, if you're.
No, go right ahead.
Gives us a revenue, an option to generate revenue to enhance management, in other words, infiltration elsewhere in within the watershed.
That makes sense, but we haven't raised the fee and
Well,
it
that's
would have had to go
okay.
to
But that's a
council.
separate issue. I think
Separate
we're
issue.
Yeah.
visit that and hopefully
Yeah.
come to more
And I
realistic
guess
cost basis.
the other thing I'm concerned with is I can understand 30 or 40 years ago when you put this in, Middleton wasn't as developed and there were places to put these facilities. There aren't anymore.
Oh, you,
Within the city limits.
in the city limits, but the city limits keep on expanding. So,
Yeah,
But
that
we're
seems like
limited.
justification for eliminating it.
you know, we got like 300,000 right now in the fees and lieu thing, and we've been holding back, thinking about either something on the north fork. It's potentially we could go outside the basin if there's something to
Outside the
enhance
city.
outside the city, yeah, into the north fork and use that to help facilitate some kind of detention or infiltration basin up there, or potentially on the south fork even. One thing that, you know, the error that I probably made is when we married our two committees together, it was my assumption that we're both on board with water resources, but it's only part of us from WRM that were familiar with the ordinance, and we probably should have backed off when we brought the stormwater utility people on board and got over the ordinance and maybe more detailed, have some of these questions answered.
Actually,
Because half the committee now is people who came from the stormwater utility who didn't really weren't aware of the
About
ordinance.
one person? I think I'm the only
I
one.
think, yeah, because I'm from conservative.
So it's not-
land.
Yeah, okay.
One.
Just because I'm knowledge of it.
That's how.
Well, Susan,
There you go.
you wouldn't have been the key though. Well, Susan, you weren't on water resource management before.
Sure.
No.
Yeah.
When?
Before they were combined.
You were on stormwater utility.
I was on stormwater utility. I have never been on water resource.
Yeah,
So there are two of us then,
yeah.
not half.
Getting closer.
Well,
Yeah.
I think, I think we probably all agree at some point we need to raise the fees because they
Yes.
haven't been
At least
raised in a number of
reevaluated.
years.
Yeah.
I personally think we should not charge half the fee of redevelopment because we're already giving redevelopment a break of
Yeah.
50%. So now they get a quarter, basically. But that, again, I don't think that is what we're talking about tonight. I accept the city attorney's opinion that we can't run afoul of state statute. And I do think this section in particular, the fees in lieu of on-site stormwater management practices, I think this reflects some errors in, or some struggles with making changes elsewhere that didn't get translated through to this. Because if you look at section 26065B,
I was trying to follow some of these. It was quite.
which is
26065B.
Yep, it's the one that says the stormwater control, that there have to be alternative offsite practices sufficient to meet stormwater control requirements. I don't know if you could pull that up there, it's
on the
it's
screen.
referenced in, yes,
Which one is it?
referenced in the letter that
On the screen,
came
yeah.
from- and that's
26065.
in a
That's on the
specific,
screen.
I get too bogged down in a specific case, but this is referenced by the letters of opposition. And I wonder, has anybody actually looked it up to see what it says? Because that is it, exceptions, B. That has nothing to do, it doesn't actually define stormwater requirements that need to be met. So there was at some point an error in
Right.
cross-referencing. I'm not sure which section it's supposed to be cross-referencing, but to hang your hat on this particular, hey, section 26065B isn't being met. It's nonsensical to say that needs to be met because it's one of two exceptions to application of our.
Yeah, that's just an added benefit of going this route, is we just get rid of that entirely and don't need to search for what the proper reference was. Before, and if there are other questions, I'm happy to address. I did want to make sure I addressed one other thing, is I received a copy of the letter today from the Axley Law Firm from Chris Nelson, who's representing some of the neighborhood folks. And I think I addressed most of the things, but I want to address in particular a claim made at the last paragraph on the first page of his letter, if any of you have seen it, and if not. But basically, it suggests that this amendment allows the city engineer to exempt developments from the requirements for just any public policy reasons, claiming it's vague and undefined. That would be contrary to the intent and spirit of the ordinance. That's not a complete reading of what this says. Well, first of all, the existing language simply says that it's allowed when performance is not feasible or desirable, and gives no parameters at all for how do you determine something is feasible or undesirable. I mean, when I first read that gave me heartburn, to be honest. And so that's when I talked with Eric a little bit and came up with this additional language. So this ordinance would actually, at least linguistically, create some more guardrails around those decisions. And so a lot of it, as I understand, were reasons why feasibility would be, why you determine it's infeasible, is oftentimes because of one of the various prohibitions that is listed in 2606I. But the other public policy reasons, not just any public policy reasons, those public policy reasons have to be consistent with the purposes of this chapter. Now, so it is fairly broad, but it is still constrained by whether those reasons are still consistent with the purposes of the chapter. And Eric, I wish I could recall and I don't know if you do, the example you gave to me, because originally when I sent a draft back to Eric, I just had the prohibitions, or maybe I had just suggested to him that would be the way to go. And he had offered me a different example where.
Yeah, I brought up the site on Pleasant View Road across from the golf course where
Top of the hill.
infiltration was being contemplated, and Water Resources was worried about lateral flow through this striated bedrock, and it was going to cause rock falls onto the PPD property. So there are, And same thing with an infiltration facility proposed next to the banks of the creek. And I said, well, we don't want to be infiltrating water 10 feet away from this one-to-one sand bank.
Right, so those are both instances where, I mean, part of the purpose of this is to keep, stormwater flows from causing downstream or off,
Right.
site problems, and if strict compliance with certain conditions would create rock walls falling on the neighbor, that is, in my opinion, a consideration that's consistent with the purposes of the
Okay, I
ordinance.
guess I need a clarification. So let's talk about on Pleasant View Road, that proposal back when I was still on council of the building that was going to go there. And you couldn't infiltrate safely into that rock. Is the
That was it.
impression.
And you could infiltrate just fine. The problem was
In the winter and just.
it's gonna come out the sides laterally was
Yeah.
the concern that I remember.
That's a little complex because there was first one that came through had two separate buildings and they had an area in the middle, and we approved the infiltration for that for at least partially. And then they changed it with more buildings and moved the infiltration to the outside to go over, and that might produce a problem. So the site could do infiltration, but not the way they configured the buildings.
Okay, well, let me just do it then as a sort of hypothetical, where you've got a site where you can't infiltrate. And then we have to give them fees in lieu. We haven't solved a problem. We've made it worse for neighbors. That's my concern.
I mean,
But
like
the
there's
infil-
extra water there, ran off the side of the hill and produced problems downstream.
Yeah.
That was a concern that we addressed. And that is,
Yeah,
that
and
is
that's
new.
why I have a problem with giving them fees in lieu of, because they couldn't do what they were supposed to. And it's a problem we can't fix.
So what you're saying, if you can't meet fees in lieu of, you shouldn't be building there with that site plan.
Yeah. And we.
Because the
may-
ordinance says this land is not suitable for development of this magnitude.
I don't know that the ordinance says that.
Well, but if you read the ordinance, if you interpret the ordinance to say you can't meet something,
Yeah.
then they have to either change their plan or not develop their.
Okay.
I think that's more of a land use
It
decision.
is a land
Yeah,
use decision.
That's not what I'm hearing from here.
No,
But I've got a problem with the idea of granting fees in lieu of when they can't meet the standards and it's going to cause problems.
I want to go back and rephrase something that I feel like I've said about 150 times. I don't think you guys should be looking at that the site is not meeting the ordinance requirements. I think it is. It's meeting the performance requirements. There are prohibitions against infiltrating in these areas with poor soils, and that's all the way from state code to county code down to our code and every other municipal code there is, because it doesn't work. And if you tell them that they have to do that, then that is essentially preventing development of anywhere with poor soils.
And importantly, for my legal point, is it would be telling them that they can't develop under our rules when they could if we were strictly complying with state law.
And we have to strictly.
And we are
comply.
required to strictly comply with state law, subject to only a few narrow exceptions. And in this instance, those narrow exceptions just don't apply.
So if we didn't have the fees in lieu of, like these other cities do, what do they do in these cities?
They don't have a fee in lieu. They just
They just get
approve.
approved.
They just
It just
And
gets
they don't
approved?
collect any
They don't
fees.
collect that.
Correct.
Right.
I just talked to Greg Freeze this afternoon. I asked this very question. I said, so give me the examples. He said, if it's that situation, the soils can't handle it. They've demonstrated it, done all the testing they're supposed to do. They get a variance, or that's the wrong word to use.
Which is why our
Approval.
fees in lieu, why one of the things we should change at some point is the name, because it's not really fees in lieu, it's a sort of a mitigation fee, because we're collecting money
Yeah.
so that we can do something with it,
Okay.
you know?
That's a semantic issue.
Right.
No,
But it's
an
important,
right.
But it's semantic issue because
Yeah,
it
I
leads
agree.
to,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, it makes it sound like if you pay us enough, we'll let you do whatever you
Well,
want.
Yeah, you're,
That's
It feels like an
exactly what it
exchange.
Yeah,
It does.
yeah.
I think when we, not, I think, when we had, I can't remember his name, Assistant City Engineer in Madison. We were,
Greg Freeze.
Greg Freeze, we went over their ordinance and we talked about that specifically because they don't have a fees in lieu of. He said they do some horse trading with development, with the developers to give and take on certain issues to get over that hump. So it wasn't fees in lieu of, but they just didn't give it to them. There was horse trading took place. Now, what that really means, I don't know.
Yeah, it varies.
So
Like to
Well,
say.
and that's what we did with the infiltration for this, for the 2159 or the Middleton Beach Road site. And I wondered about that after reading all of the correspondence. Are we, so we asked the developer to come back with a better
Less
plan.
impervious
Yeah,
area.
that would increase infiltration or reduce impervious surfaces. Could they have just said, no, because our site is technically exempt from the infiltration requirement?
I mean, I don't know in this particular instance, but I mean, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like. are we-
conceivably, yeah, I mean, these are kind of, like I said, a careful marrying of the law and the engineering and the physics of how this goes. So I want to be pretty cautious about how I say this is going to apply in a variety of different circumstances. But, I think the point is well taken, that particularly for this standard where you've got the regulation set up to say, okay, we'd like you to infiltrate, but you don't do it in these certain circumstances. That is considered following and meeting the performance standards set forth in the code. And so, yeah, I think there is some semantic difficulty with the way we have set this up, because it does make it look like you are letting people buy out of
Yeah,
things. But here, I mean, it's important to get back to this idea that here, this is really specific to a notion of requiring that in order to even engage in that they be able to meet something that just simply isn't possible. And moreover, it's just not the way that other developments have proceeded in the city. And as I said, if we didn't have the fees in lieu program, it's not how it would proceed under state statute. This would be approved.
well, the control the city had was in zoning the property. They zoned it like they did now. If they zoned it like our recommendation was to, because of the poor soils, not to have large development or not to have a lot of impervious area. But
so if we had, for this particular property, if it had been zoned as staying a single family, it'd
Right.
be way less of a
it
problem.
could potentially,
No.
I don't think that's necessarily true.
Explain.
but maybe not.
Well, I'm just quoting from memory, but I think it's 65% impervious. So if you would,
For single family?
no,
This-
currently.
Oh,
This
currently.
proposal.
Okay.
So if we had, or if they had proposed a single family development with a tiny little street network in there, you're gonna end up approaching that same number. I mean, it was, when we looked at this
Okay.
last fall, yes, it was more impervious, but it's not that much of a difference.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it depend
If
on
they-
how big they made the lots?
Yeah,
Excuse me.
They made the houses
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It would need to be more
And how
like
many
a
houses there
PDD
would have been?
development.
per acre, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
but below a certain number, there would be no stormwater management plan, correct?
No, any land division like that is gonna cost stormwater management.
But maybe you shouldn't be asking this question, but was there a point in the process, throughout this process where, and I think it was in the zoning change, where the city could have said, we don't want anything more than this density here, impervious, period. We have that authority to say something like that at some point?
I think Water Resources did make that recommendation and
Well-
Plan Commission allowed a higher density.
But do we have the authority, not just the commission, but council itself to say, yes, we agree, This should be the maximum.
Well, prior, what this
Imperviousness.
was prior to new zoning code and adopting a new zoning map, it was single family. So
Single
we-
family.
I mean, there really couldn't have been anything that we could have done to, you know, because we have some, some restrictions now on us to downzone property, so it probably was never likely to go from single family to anything less. You know, we didn't have to rezone it from single family to whatever it is now,
Yeah.
then, but, well, that answers your
Zoning.
question.
Individual zoning code includes some maximum impervious, the single family.
Now it does.
Now
It
it
used to be lot coverage, and so that's why what the plan commission had requested and staff provided was an estimate of, okay, if the recommendation from the commission, this commission, was to keep it, not allow more impervious surface than currently allowed, how does that work when you're comparing apples to oranges?
Yeah.
So we asked for them to make it an apples to apples comparison, and that's why this site is divided into two, which overall meets close to, not exactly, but it is not that much more than what would have been allowed
Right.
under the old single family with lot coverage. Because lot coverage did not include things like streets.
Right, I think it's be very hard to do that, apples to apples,
Yeah.
when you don't have that in place.
Right.
Man, I think you answered the question, but I just want to make sure that phrase we just mentioned 10 minutes ago about public policy reasons. It's not two phases that says public policy reasons, comma, or be consistent with the purpose. It's all one. The public policy reasons have to be consistent with the purpose of this chapter.
Right,
It's all tied together.
correct. Yeah, you can't just, well, for whatever, like I
Right.
said, in all the instances we gave that, yeah, there's one thing, but again, you know, there'd be potentially off-site damage if we did this. That seems to be a good public policy reason that is also consistent with the purposes of the chapter.
Okay, that
And I'm
helps.
Getting this, that if there's a site where somebody builds something, you can't infiltrate over something, and it could potentially easily cause damage to adjacent property. We still have to approve it with fees in lieu of.
No,
I would just go back to what Eric said in his memo the first time we were looking at the plan, which is, you know, your desire to, like, your goal is to protect
Right.
downstream properties from damage, and you would not approve a plan that would damage downstream properties. We've also said, and I'm really uncomfortable about this. I understand why it's turning into a relitigation of everything we've already decided with regard to one property. But technically, this is not a discussion of that one property.
I know,
Yeah,
we understand.
that's not what I'm trying to talk about. I'm talking about just a hypothetical situation where you can't meet the infiltration
well,
standards. Do we still have to give them permission with fees in lieu of?
Yeah, but I think the answer is yes, but why don't you just take fees in lieu of out of your sentence and consider that a separate,
Okay, if
Thing.
something doesn't meet the standards, do we have to give?
it is meeting the standards because it's prohibited from infiltrating due to poor soils. This is the,
I'm not talking about Middleton Beach Road.
No,
I'm talking about any site with poor soils
Okay.
is prohibited from infiltration. So we're either going to allow the site to be developed without achieving the infiltration that we would want if it were a better site, or you're gonna tell them that they can't develop that site.
And then,
Yeah. So
then what happens
And you get in
Yeah.
trouble.
if we tell someone you can't
Can-
develop that site because
So we might end up buying that site, I would say.
we don't have to always give, okay.
I have a question
Okay.
about the 2%. of the total area. How does that, and you've brought that up a number of times, that you can't have more than 2% of the area. You're not required to have more than 2% of the developable area for infiltration.
Right, that basically comes out of NR 151.
So in
And
this
the
case,
Developer's amendment that says we're not allowed to ask for more than 90% infiltration. And we're not allowed to ask more than 2% of the site be used for an
Dedicated.
infiltrated facility.
right. So does that override the other requirement?
Yeah, I mean, if the county were looking at this and they're looking at a site that that can't infiltrate, then they would say, you give us a facility that's 2% of the site, and then you will be approved. And it doesn't matter, it just needs to be like a green, like a biofilter that's not infiltrating into the ground, but that's still
So
providing.
out near Costco, one of those vacant lots where it's not going to infiltrate, will break.
It doesn't do it.
Later tonight.
Or it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't.
So they could put in a small pond and still build.
We recognize that and gave them a variance. And so they got the ponds there are for grease and
Yeah,
sediment
like
removal,
for
not for
Costco.
infiltration.
But I'm
Lack
talking
of
about going forward.
infiltrations, is not gonna cause like a life safety issue.
Right.
I mean, maybe that's what needs
That's-
to be said here.
You know, as Ken once said near the end is, we have a groundwater flooding problem in Middleton and infiltration enhances groundwater flooding, so.
Yeah, we're not causing, I'm comfortable we're not causing downstream damages by not meeting the infiltration.
So what do we need tonight on this, Eric? Well,
I need to ask, I'm gonna ask, are we comfortable? To me, the bigger question is, we're gonna eliminate peak flow, runoff volume control, water quality, sediment control from this option, right? The way it's written.
The way it is written, yes.
And that tells us, or let me ask the question this way, does that mean that if somebody can't meet a peak flow condition, just pick that one, that they've done the maximum extent practicable, they've done all they could do, they can't meet the number, we will approve the plan, even though it doesn't meet peak flow, and there would be no fee in lieu of compensation. Do I have that right?
No, I don't think we would allow exemption from.
We just say you can't get, okay, the answer would be
If
no.
it mattered, that.
Yeah. If it's 100th of a CFS on a 100-year storm, no
Right.
one's gonna argue about it, right? Yeah.
Just approve.
For the 1 year, and 2 year on that site, yes.
I just want, so that's fine with me, as long as that's the understanding is that there would not be exceptions for peak flow or sediment.
that's not a change, that's not a change from our current policy, is it?
I think so, because the current policy is more generic on what fee in lieu of.
Well, the
the
old policy would just be infiltration and recharge.
Compliance, fee in lieu of, fee in lieu
Right.
of.
But we wouldn't go back and change the approval of something for peak flow.
On this one particular
Yeah.
site,
Well, the most recently granted one.
boy, that's a good question. I would be in favor of getting rid of that, yeah. That one piece of the field.
Say that again, Eric, I'm not, that's right, I understand.
When this commission approved the fees in lieu request, it included a dollar amount for failing to meet the 1 year rate control. And then the revisions we asked for would have caused them to not meet the 2 year rate control either. So that would have been a substantial dollar amount. Or would still be. But yeah, I would recommend if we change the ordinance like this, that we don't seek that fee in lieu for the peak rate control.
Or the other categories.
You recommend what, Eric?
That we do not seek the fee in lieu payment for the peak rate control on that one site, on the Allen site.
So how would you change the wording as it is now and leave it the way it's proposed?
No, leave it the way Matt has proposed to revise it. Which is only allowing it for infiltration and recharge.
But then does that force the developer to meet the flow?
That's my question.
Yeah, that's.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, this is, I think, kind of the whole issue is trying to separate the fees in lieu from meeting performance requirements.
So they would be required to meet the 1 and 2 year peak flow then.
No, you'd have to leave that up to engineers' discretion, that it's not consequential.
Okay, but there's no fees in lieu attached to it.
Right.
I just,
Yeah, Eric.
I feel like the discussion is they either do this or they do that. I think what you need to think in terms of is an engineer or a developer submits a plan and the reviewers hold their feet to the fire and get them as close to the ordinance as possibly can be done. And there are these few instances where they can't. And instead of calling it a fee in lieu or some kind of an alternative thing, think of it as a penalty. All right, you did everything you can do, you can't make it, pay this penalty.
Yeah.
So why would we not want, I shouldn't be asking Eric, but I will. Why would we not want to apply that to the other categories of the criteria?
If you're confident that the site has been maximized, I would say yes, why wouldn't you?
Well, I wouldn't want to have sediment control be something, well, no, I guess if we're saying, if it's a 2-tier thing, then the first level, does it meet the maximum extent practicable? You know, did they achieve our performance standards to the maximum extent practicable?
MEP doesn't.
And
appear
if
to
the
say-
answer is yes, then good to go. The next tier is, can we charge a fee for them not, for the MEP not being 100% of what we require of them? And if our only goal was to, how was it phrased today, add to the city's coffers, then I would say we should charge a fee, but that isn't our goal.
No, I agree.
We want to make sure we're charging for things that make sense. And if Eric and Matt have concluded that infiltration and recharge are the two that make sense, I'm comfortable with that.
When I came on board and talked to the county folks, they had told me they would no longer allow a fee in lieu for rate control or water quality.
They have that authority to tell the cities they can't do that?
Well, we have to meet their ordinance as well.
Right.
Now, that doesn't make sense if the ordinance is written so that by asking for a fee in lieu, we're providing a downstream facility. Then that's a different case and that should all work out fine. But those opportunities, are few and far between. The Airport Road Business Park was at the plat level, they built Confluence Pond, and now those properties are covered for rate control. But we're not asking fees in lieu. They just don't have to build a rate control basin and they can use Confluence Pond. So I would think in the future, if we have there's some commercial properties that will develop within the Red Tail plat, and they are covered or partially covered by a downstream regional basin. So we're not gonna, we didn't build that, it was paid for by the developer. It could just as easily have been paid for and dedicated to the city, but it was built to serve. That was part of those startup costs for that development.
It seemed like we got to resolve this somehow or else go on to the next topic.
I know. Can
Well,
We're on to an hour almost.
I move that we that we accept the proposed revisions and recommend that the L&O committee and common council will approve. Right.
I think if we send it to them, they need to have a lot of information and education so that valid decisions on it.
I would welcome the second.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Is there any downside to tabling this for a month? And let us think about it some more.
I would make a motion that we table it for a month.
I can't make a motion yet, so I'm just asking the question. It's discussion time now. We got the second, so that's my question.
It seems like it might be, number one is it kind of looks bad with the Allen thing anyway, doing it right away. It seemed like tabling it and give it time would make some sense.
I'll think about it somewhere.
Well, we
Yeah.
Allen Boulevard, I think those people feel like we're making this change to get around the ordinance to
I-
their appealing.
I-
So tabling
They're listening, so.
it, give-
I thought Eric did an excellent job.
His letter
putting
was
He did.
and I-
awesome.
I
Yeah.
want that to be reflected in the minutes of this meeting, because that's not part of the record. But I thought you did an excellent
Yeah.
job explaining that this is not at all. The one thing I cannot abide is when people who feel aggrieved try to throw staff under the bus. And that's happened many times here in this situation, on this commission and in the plan commission as well. And it doesn't do any favors for the people who are trying to stop something or, get their way. Staff are just doing their job. They're advising us as they should. We trust their expertise and we trust their guidance. And that's why I'm comfortable. I trust the L&O committee. You participate in their discussions, correct? I trust them to make a decision on this. There are things I would change. For example, I would take out the sentence about the fee in lieu of any water management practice for redevelopment shall be half that for new development. I would take that out because I think that's giving them a double break.
Okay, is there an opportunity for that to happen?
Yeah.
Between now and council?
We could do it right now, make that recommendation.
Part of the
I still
motion.
think we need to spend a little more time. I don't see the urgency in doing it tonight so that we can give clear communications to L&O Plan Commission Council who have no background or very limited background in stormwater. Because it's a complicated ordinance and I think they need to be able to understand it before they vote on it.
I'm not disagreeing with anything Lisa you said. I think Eric did that email back that Eric responded with was really well done, well written, very clear. I would like that to be, I don't know if you incorporate that into the minutes somehow.
I can put that in there.
Yeah.
You can just cut and paste that in.
Um,
Or attach the
I don't
whole
s-
email.
But is there a downside? That's my question.
Yeah, I don't see an advantage to delaying. I think by the time this gets to the council, there will be time for it to be properly explained. Matt's at every meeting.
Well, I mean-
I will be there and Eric, I'm sure will.
I mean, we're going to explain it. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, if this committee needs more time itself to understand it, that's one thing. If this is a matter of whether staff can properly educate L&O and the council, I feel pretty confident that we can. I mean, like I said, I think despite all the changes there, I mean, really, there are only two major things going on with this particular change. One is just confining fees in lieu to infiltration and recharge, and the second, and in my opinion, the most important thing, at least from a legal perspective, is the elimination of the downstream requirement, because it's requiring something that's just simply not possible for virtually any development. And I don't know that there's really much greater understanding that either the council or L&O need to have about this particular change.
And this is not the time to go through other revisions that would like to see on this ordinance.
No, I mean, and I think there are other I know Eric's been looking at a lot of other things, but I don't know if I want to characterize this as an urgent thing, but it is, it does address an issue that is being put in play for an existing situation. And it needs to be cleared up because it puts us in a kind of an untenable position of two different sides having different positions, and it's my job to put the city in the correct legal position, and I think the correct legal position is to fix something in particular that is not workable or likely legal in our ordinance. And I really would prefer that, again, like I said, if this committee really needs more time to understand it, that's one thing. But I mean, otherwise, to me, that's the urgency is we just have something that's been brought to light that is particularly difficult, unworkable, and causes legal problems for the city.
And we have another fees in lieu request
Yeah.
on the agenda tonight.
Well, and I feel it's our obligation to make sure that the city is protected. And if our ordinance is not 100% legal with regard to this specific matter, and there might be others that we just haven't uncovered yet. As we go through the ordinance, we might find those, but for that reason, I don't see the value in waiting another month.
And I don't disagree with, again, the issue of the downstream fix needs to be corrected. What I don't want to convey is a message that, well, water resources approved, that council looks at, says water resource approval, whatever, unanimous, and they must know what they're doing, so that's that. Because if they ask me a question about something, I'm not gonna be able to answer it. I have questions on this that I'm
Yeah,
gonna
that's
feel to respond to.
exactly what I'm feeling.
So I understand the reason to approve it. I just don't want to send the wrong message either.
Right.
So you recommend that we
The message, sorry. Jim.
delay and talk about it more like next?
And we take a vote on the motion like we supposed.
Can't do a substitute motion.
I don't know. I don't know.
It depends on the motion, but I would vote for the motion I made. I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's things like this that make housing more expensive in Middleton, frankly.
Say it again.
I think it's things like this, trying to grapple with an issue, and let's take more time to think about it some more. When we've got good advice from staff that we trust, that just drives up housing costs for everybody in Middleton. And that is something that, as a member of the Plan Commission and Workforce Housing and Council, we're always looking for ways to make housing more affordable. And, delay after delay isn't making that happen. So I feel like I'm ready. I've steeped myself in this and studied it, and I've paid attention when Eric explains for the 151st time, Eric, what the fees in lieu are and are not. So I'm comfortable voting, and I guess we'll find out if we call the vote.
Okay,
How comfortable people are.
I'm ready to call a vote. So we have a motion and a second. So all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried.
Like some questions.
Who was no?
Aye.
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 For two.
You were no?
No, yeah.
2-0.
Okay. Sorry.
It is 6:53. We can take a short break. Can we take a short break for
Okay,
personal meetings?
what if I say no?
The minutes reflect.
Well, that ball went too quick. I couldn't keep up.
Man, what
So-
did it take to replace?
So when's Eric on? We should do his, this is next.
We off?
No.
No.
Well, let's see.
Well,
So number 5 will be discussed now.
Well, wait, we have Bruce Holler too. So we should get that out of the way. And I was saying switch 4 and 5.
Okay, that's good.
So,
Fees no request.
right.
Okay. Introduce it, Eric.
Yeah, so this site is in the Airport Road Business Park. Off of Forsythia, just south of Airport Road. And Bruce Holler with D'Onofrio did up a plan here. If I could display it. So I think this is like an outpatient facility, so relatively small building and parking lot. They've got 2 biofilters set up and they have poor soils.
Or meaning muck,
Just
And
high
high groundwater, right?
high groundwater too, yeah.
It's 3 feet below soil, groundwater.
As little as 2.5, 2 or 2.5 even. When they were digging it, so.
Sort of needs, it's a boat.
So anticipating, all these sites, we have these issues. We've done a couple of them since I've been here. I went over with Bruce, his calculation, I just showing a little correction here, but staff is recommending approval. Of the feasibility request. And if you have questions, details with Bruce, you can step in.
Mhm.
Why was it reduced from 8,800 down to 50?
Well, because the way we calculate it is they only pay the worst of the 2 between infiltration and recharge. So
And is that because the 2 are related?
yeah,
You want to,
and that's just
Are there any sites in that area that have infiltration?
in a business park?
Yeah, I can't remember any.
I don't think so.
well, go back to those, and there is some infiltration occurring, right? With those biofilters, you got some numbers
Yeah.
there.
But they're both lined, aren't they, Bruce?
Yeah, they're both lined and that is
This is.
a DSPS regulation when
Okay,
they don't have and that's related to, the separation of the groundwater and so that's why we have that in there. But we have, the site actually is relatively, I don't know what my percentage is of green space, but we tried to be as efficient as we could with the parking lot size and not get it too big. So we've got that going for us. A little bit more pervious area on the lot as a whole.
So they get recharged just passively, Jim.
yeah, okay, from the lawns and.
Green space that's
Yeah, okay.
left over.
Okay,
We could ask for more green infrastructure in lieu of infiltration.
You could, and it won't change that number. But it would improve stay on perhaps.
Yeah. Because of ET being removed, the volume of water is going to increase substantially with the impervious area. So ET accounts for 2/3 of the water lost. 2/3 of the precipitation is lost by ET. So we're going to get a lot more volume of water where green infrastructure would help reduce that volume.
yeah.
Some kind of plants on the roof or
Put some plants in anywhere on the grounds that you could put one, some.
I think a lot of plants to do that. I don't know. I don't know what most green infrastructure really means. I think it's like the rooftops, like we did on Greenway Center there, where they had our garden top of their grass.
But what about some trees around it?
Oh, there's a
Tree
landscaping
requirements.
plan there, Susan.
Yeah.
We're just not showing it here.
It's that apartment building in Greenway Center, they're going to do green infrastructure. They're doing grass and turf top of the roof, which with evapotranspiration, so. But that's not in our ordinance to require that.
To require what?
Green infrastructure by reducing the volume.
No, we don't have anything in the ordinance that says the words green infrastructure.
In the revisions I made, I include something like that for our, I think that's a different.
Discussion.
So what do we need tonight? A motion to approve the fees on the roof?
That's what I recommended, yes.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion for approval and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
6-0.
Thank you.
6-0.
Thanks, Bruce.
All right, thank you.
Okay, the next one then is 5.
So we're gonna switch 4 and 5.
We're gonna switch with number 7.
Is it the big boys table or?
7. We got a lot to go.
Rise up from the bottom, so Dave.
Okay, so
Look at number 4.
Department of Public Works restructuring. Sean Stowski is retiring probably middle of April. And with that impending problem, I have also announced my resignation for about the middle of April. There were 2 positions approved by the utility referendum, the utility foreman, and he is hired internally. And the utility technician, the advertisement is ready to go out. Hasn't happened yet, but hopefully that position will get filled in a month and a half.
So the utility foreman position was just a, there's now a vacancy from where that person came from, is that right?
Right, and they're trying to
Backfill.
backfill that position.
So the referendum didn't include 2 engineers for stormwater utility.
No,
There's 2 positions.
no, and we had asked for an engineer as a part of the budget through, dollars that the stormwater utility freed up essentially from the regular old public works budget because
Yeah.
we took over the street sweeper, et cetera. So admin split up Sean's position into a director and a city engineer. And Sean is now just the director and I am the city engineer and stormwater utility manager. But, kind of the issue is we need another engineer when Sean retires. And that's, I just cannot handle that workload. Part of what admin proposed was hiring out plan review services, and that's why Eric Thompson is here. So we've already executed a task order with MSA to do plan reviews for private development sites. Eric is actually my former supervisor when I worked at MSA. He knows his stuff, and he's going to be handling the stormwater management aspects of that. That task order is good for a year, and then we'll redo it. So this is really just kind of to brief you guys, and if you have any comments on any of this.
Sean's advertisement is out, right?
Yeah, so there's an advertisement for both mine and Sean's jobs. They both close Sunday.
And you've had 10 applicants already?
I don't know. I don't think there's been a lot of response, but usually a lot of people will wait until the last minute to submit. Tough.
Will that change? It'll be 2 PE. I'm sorry, did you? Diane Rips.
I had a comment. I don't want you to go.
Thank you.
Well, I've got a motion I'll submit later, but can we just talk about how Eric's going to handle the review first? So how is that gonna work? You're gonna, development comes in and then you guys will do the review that you were doing previously?
Yeah, and we'll still have a simultaneous county review as well. For difficult things, there'll definitely be times when Eric is gonna have to come to a water resources meeting to explain or.
I know Jim had some concerns about it. He registered about,
Well, yeah, and I've expressed this to Eric, and I'm not concerned with this Eric because, yeah, I've known him for a long, long time. But I would like, as a general policy, some kind of written statement that says whoever we hire for doing reviews, which is great, they agree in writing not to be an engineer for any kind of subdivision development occurring in the city of Middleton.
So in other words, conflict avoidance.
Conflict employees. If it's a,
It doesn't have to be an engineer for a development. It could be an engineer for a little medical facility we just looked at. Same thing.
how do you, I'm not sure what you're saying, Don.
Well, I'm saying that if he were the engineer, the site development, medical facility that we just reviewed and approved.
That'd be a conflict of
That would be
interest.
a conflict also. So it's not a development, it's a conflict period.
Yeah,
Yes.
He can't work for anyone developing, and if he does, he's got to say, hey, I'm not reviewing this, you got to find somebody else. And I'm sure Eric will just bow down and say, no problem.
Well, I mean, honestly, I looked through our records. We did something for a developer in 2013.
Yeah.
For the Lions, the King's ransom of $5,000. I mean, all we did was help them size a pond that they, for whatever reason, couldn't size. So we don't do it. I mean, don't get me wrong, my firm does development work. We just don't do it here.
right. That's all I'm asking is that we have that understanding as part of a written policy somewhere.
And Jim, your concern is limited to cases in which Eric would be reviewing something specific, something that MSA is presenting, not any, not if MSA is working on any development in Middleton. This Eric too doesn't get to be our reviewer of
Well,
stormwater management plans for anything,
No, just things he's
just
working on.
things he's working on.
Yeah,
Well, I'm not sure I'm hearing the same thing here. You're talking about Eric as an individual, sorry to pick on you, but Eric as an individual or somebody who works for Eric or somebody who works in another office with MSA for a developer like the medical site, let's say, just for an example. That's a question.
I guess what I'm asking is, all you're seeking is that we have a written policy that if MSA presents a stormwater management plan to the city, this Eric would not be the one reviewing.
I would add, MSA is not the engineer of record
Right. correct.
for that plan.
And MSA wouldn't review it.
Right.
Well, I'm not arguing. My position would be, we would get ahead of that and not do the work. Right. Not do the
Right.
development
Yeah.
work.
Right, exactly right. You wouldn't be involved with that contractor.
They don't pay anyway, Eric, you don't want to.
Oh, that's terrible business. We'd never work for developers because it
The
just
company I worked for was,
kills you.
we don't want to work for those guys, they don't pay their bills.
but Jim, do you want to put that in sort of a motion to a recommendation? That's,
Yeah, I think
or
we
just do it
should.
as a,
Uh,
Seems like something that should be in the ethics of it,
Yeah.
of life in the city anyway.
Right.
No, it
So
should be.
the task order that we've already signed does have a limitation in it, but it's only a quarter mile. If you're doing development work within a quarter mile.
of that site or what?
Right.
Oh,
So that kind of makes sense, we'll hire MSA or somebody else to do like a street project. We don't want them designing a street if they're designing a site development right next to it. I don't think MSA has a policy that we're not gonna work in Middleton. That's just the way it's happened, right? And
Be perfectly honest, I mean, all the contracting of development work is not handled by my team.
yeah,
So we do, I mean,
I understand.
me and my team, we're just water resources nerds. And on occasion, we help developers, but we don't handle those contracts or anything.
And I'm not, again, don't take this the wrong way. I've been in the business too. And even though we didn't do site development plans, if somebody in the Sheboygan office did, it's just too easy to have a phone call to say, hey, what do I need to do for this? Or how's this work? Or, you know.
Yeah, I'm not gonna paint the picture that there's not the possibility that somehow this couldn't happen.
Yeah.
I will tell you in practice, so my counterpart is Kevin Lord, who Eric also knows. He's sort of the municipal representative for the region that the Madison office represents. And so, you know, we have an office in Baraboo, we have an office in Beaver Dam, you know, they're reasonably close by. They could potentially be contacted by developer XYZ.
Right.
They won't do that without first checking with Kevin. And, you know, there's even checks above Kevin. They won't do that. I mean, I can't guarantee you 100% perfect, but, you know, not our policy, and we have steps in place to prevent that.
Okay. I trust you on that. It's not, and this is not geared toward MSA. It's whoever comes along and does this work, you know.
Yeah.
I'm thinking long term. And to be clear, I'm not objecting to if a street design, municipal street reconstruction comes along and MSA wants to bid on that, I don't see a conflict of interest there if it's a public works project of some sort. I don't know, Don, how you feel about that.
First of all, they don't bid on anything.
For engineering services?
Correct.
Well,
And if you ever say that again, I will walk.
geez, these
Damn
consultants. Consultants.
I don't.
Pee it for a
Yeah.
proposal.
Yeah,
Proposal.
NSP says.
We're in Wisconsin, not Illinois.
We
Right,
bid.
there's no QBS.
QBS, and granted,
That's right.
they go to 3 qualified firms and
Yes.
this guy lowly gets the job, but it's not a
This
bid.
is, I understand what you're saying.
Jeez.
All right, so
Yes.
back to my point. You have a concern if who's ever doing the stormwater reviews would propose on a municipal funded project, like whatever.
My concern is that he's not reviewing his own work.
That MSA is not reviewing MSA's work. That's my statement.
That's it.
All right, thank you.
Beyond that, you want to do a road curb and gutter, have at it.
Yeah. Go for it. Lose your shirt again.
And when the city know that, they give a plan to them to review if there's a conflict and not give them that plan to review.
We would.
Yes.
Yeah.
We would absolutely.
Then we gotta find somebody else to do
But
that.
we already have Strand as a contracted service.
Yeah.
They do our water and sewer
I like having
analysis.
consistency also, so I like having one firm do it. This guy's been around the block a few times. He knows what Middleton wants and needs, and then if he gets Strand doing one review and MSA doing a
That
different
would,
one,
the only case we would have Strand do that is if
I understand.
the conflict happened.
All right, maybe I'm making them out, none of them will.
Do you want
I'll
to
shut
express
up.
that concern in a motion?
Apparently not, Scott. I'm not here in support for this.
Something else you guys might want to consider, and no action or anything tonight, but if, you know, whoever replaces me, if they are don't have the same level of expertise, you may want to look at, you know, a go-to engineer to handle stormwater issues, you know, more internally, city projects.
Oh,
You know, like we use Strand
Like
for
we use Strand.
water
Yeah,
distribution
right.
system and our
yeah,
sanitary collection system.
there's a possibility, yeah. But one question I have, well, what is our role going to be now? Is this going to be a change for us, or are we going to have any?
I think the real difference is Eric, myself, and Sean aren't doing it as in depth, but the plans would still come on the occasions that it's something you guys want to review.
But informally, I have discussions with Eric now about some concerns
Yes, sir.
that might take place. And I voiced them to where now it goes to MSA, I probably not going to have that concern or be able to voice my concerns.
Well,
Without knowing who
you'll
you're
have to
hiring.
go through the staffer who replaces me, but yeah, you might end up.
Could you, before it goes to MSA for review by the city, would we be able to have some input before it goes to them?
That would be awfully difficult.
That becomes a
We're always
timing
under
issue.
time
Yeah.
crunch with trying to get reviews done and.
So we wouldn't know about until it came back to us, the review came back to the committee. Like the concern, like Bell Farms, I have concern about the operation of Graber's Pond that I expressed a number of times about how like review should consider the increase of volume of runoff and what's going to do to the operation of Graber Pond. But would MSA know that ahead of time? They wouldn't.
No, you may not have that
Well,
expertise
I
in
would say-
house.
That's actually kind of a bad example, because I know Graber Pond, right, from projects
Yeah.
that MSA's done and just having been around. the
Yeah.
city for a while. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I kind of, I don't know if I pat myself on the back, is I like to look at these developments as more than just, hey, this is our parcel, right? How does this fit into the whole system? And so we're reviewing, what is it, Pheasant Crossing right now. And one of the things that just keeps running through my mind every time I shuffle the papers on my desk is, I know they're running more volume into into Graber Pond. But, you know, your ordinance doesn't really have, I sometimes refer to this as the God clause, but it's a God with a little G, where, hey, look, we know you're impacting this downstream water body. I mean, arguably, by putting more volume into that water body, you're raising the flood elevation. And since you don't have total control over that basin, however much you're raising that water, you're taking someone else's land. And that's, you know, not really allowed, except your ordinance doesn't have this threshold where you can say, too bad, you can't do that. So, you know, part of this whole process is me learning, all right, where are the guardrails? What authority do I have to even make a recommendation, let alone push it through the system and cause the design to be changed because of
Yeah. Well, like Graber Pond, that is an example that is, I think a model should be done on a continuous basis like you guys did instead of just an event model, because as operation over the years, the water levels are liable to increase. And so what's the frequency of overflow is going to be? It's more than the 2-year or 5-year event routing that. It could be much more frequently than we have a channel problem downstream. And I think I raised that to the developer and he said, yeah, they would do that. Well, they didn't. So it's expensive and I could understand that.
So, I can interrupt you. Jeff Felland, who brought us the proposal for the Graber
Yeah.
Greenway,
Yeah.
there is a revision to that that incorporates comments that the committee made, you know, and it's a more expensive proposal,
Yeah.
but it includes you know, more like an annual model where we're gonna look at Graber's response.
Well, when I do the ordinance, I submitted a revised, revised the runoff control ordinance. I put a volume in there. And I put in some statements about what I think our ordinance should require for a closed watershed like that. And so I guess at that time that might be addressed anyway.
Yeah, and you know, I know you're talking about your ordinance, and your ordinance has evolved since I last studied it, you know, because I'm trying to get phoned up for these reviews, but it's still not entirely in compliance with Dane County. And Dane County does have closed basin rules. They're not quite so well specified as I'd like them to be, but they at least have dipped their foot in the pool.
Yeah.
That's something we should consider.
Yeah, I guess then that satisfies how it's
Yeah, I mean,
how it's going to work. We're not being removed from the whole
No,
process at all.
The premise of hiring an outside consultant is that to do private development reviews is that the private developer is gonna bear those costs. All these other things we're talking about is something that the city would have to bear. So that's what's gonna have to get decided, I think, is want to bring somebody in, you know, kind of under a standard contract, a general contract that just says, look, if we have questions, we need to have some of your time. And then that would probably have to get funded out of the utility budget.
And that right now is not in the agreement that we have been
No.
put together the task.
There are definitely gonna be administrative costs that they're just, you know, coming out of our
Yeah.
general budget.
So the city's going to pay MSA, not the developer.
Right, but then we'll charge
Yeah,
back.
so when we submit our
Developers.
invoices, it'll be, hey, I worked X hours on this development, worked X hours on that development, and I attended a meeting, you know, and meeting will either be related to
Yeah.
a development or I'll just be here for a meeting. And then whoever processes our invoice, we'll say, all right, this
Yeah.
came out of that account because it's that developer's agreement, so on and so forth.
Yeah,
So the county, we're paying the county some money for their reviews.
No,
That's,
we don't pay them.
oh,
Well, we do pay them and then we bill it back to various permittees.
see, that does go back to the land
It
developers.
does,
And so they'll say a new bill
right?
with other fees on there or costs. Do they need to be forewarned of this, or is that just gonna happen?
That's already happening.
Charge them in advance.
It's like in escrow.
We are.
We put money in escrow.
Escrows, yeah, to handle that. And Jesse is very involved in trying to keep everybody up to speed or.
so when the county reviews it, then is MSA going to coordinate with county review, or does it go through you back, or your replacement back to the county?
It
TBD.
makes sense for them to.
If these guys hash it out, the county and Eric hash it out, then it's gone past that.
So MSA goes back and forth with the county?
Yeah.
Okay,
I think.
And the developer.
and the developer, yeah, okay. Yeah,
It's gonna be messy at first.
Yeah, I mean, there's just all sorts of like, yeah, I'm just learning this myself, right? But there's like a check-in process, a submittal gets made, presumably Jesse distributes it. And then there's a time clock, like we got to get our reviews done, I don't know, 2 weeks or something. And then, I'm reviewing stormwater stuff, but we've got other folks at MSA who are reviewing the plans, right? They put in the right curve, they put in the right slopes on the streets, all that.
Oh, this being contracted for other besides stormwater.
Yep.
Okay.
And so then we got to put up all of our stuff together and then submit it back. And then, of course, the developer and their engineer have a chance to comment on it. Where I am, I wouldn't say that I'm anxious over it, but where I see there could be trouble in the future is when I, as the consultant to the city, make a recommendation. And let's just say it's something I feel pretty strong about, like you need to do this. And they say, no. Where does the authority lie to cause that to happen?
Has to go back to here. Morris.
Your public works.
Yep, that could come through Public Works.
well, I'm
So
number one, because our relationship with MSA and Eric, but I guess with some other consultants
That's right.
that's involved.
so you're doing
Sean gonna give us
traffic,
the same story.
streets
again?
and lights and
I don't know about lights, but traffic's come up.
Maybe.
in the general civil plan.
Is there any more questions about the arrangement with contracting?
besides not letting Eric leave, you mean?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to go back to that issue, and I'd like to make a motion. That I would like to make a motion is, and I'll read it. I would like to make a motion that common council do whatever they can to retain Eric as the city engineer. Eric has been extremely important to Water Resource Management and Stormwater Utility Commission in meeting its mission of protecting and enhancing the water resources of Middleton. Jim sent an email to the commission members that I would like to include an excerpt from that email in the motion that best describes Eric's importance to Middleton. And that excerpt is, I want you to know that the city of Middleton is losing one of the best engineers, public servants, and persons I have worked with over my career. Eric is a recognized expert in his profession, but as importantly, he has an exceptional ability to communicate with WRMSUC, elected officials, and the public. He listens and respects different points of views, but does not compromise on issues that he knows are the benefit of the environment and the city. So that's the motion I'd like to submit.
I don't do shorthand.
Sorry, number.
I'll give you a copy.
I would happily take that.
Said I'm also a crier, so.
You could email that to me, and I can just
I
cut and paste it in too.
I could do that, or,
I think we.
Very
all
nice,
second
thank you.
okay. Then we got a motion and a second, all in favor?
that. Hi.
Okay,
You want some discussion?
I'm not gonna say no. Is there any, well, you can't answer this question, all right,
But we will make you cry.
we'll be crying, one or the other.
I don't know who seconded that.
We
Just,
all did.
okay, unanimous second,
Yes.
Yeah,
Simultaneous.
I'll take it to
simultaneous.
council.
Okay,
There have been some overtures trying to get me to stay from it.
good. So especially if no one else applies. Yeah.
Well,
What they slashed your description was, I couldn't run away.
I don't get a vote, but I vote that way too.
Okay, next item of business is, thanks, Eric.
Yeah, I'm gonna excuse myself. Thank you.
I'm sorry I
Sir,
had to sit so long.
Oh, it's all right. There's nobody at home.
Here,
Yeah.
so back to number
4.
4. So floodplain zoning ordinance update. The DNR had contacted us in the fall. You know, this has to be done because they did some map revisions and made some other changes. I hope nobody got real bogged down in this because most of it's just following. In our mind.
Yeah, I read the whole thing.
Twice.
She had it color coded with various revisions that are related to what, but I think there's really only 2 things we want to need to make a recommendation to Plan Commission about. One is the CRS program and the other is the which I was not familiar with at all.
the 175 one,
Yeah,
I'm not here.
I had looked into the CRS stuff a couple of years ago, and I thought it would be a good thing to do when we update the flood maps, because what it does is provide flood insurance discounts. You know, and to get those, we have to, you know, do certain things, a little more strict regulations and more public education things too. You know, and there's a sliding scale of, well, your residents are gonna qualify for a 10% discount, 20% discount, et cetera. So it's something that's gonna take staff time and, you know, it's a cost. There'll be a lot of people that end up in the floodplain that weren't there before. When we enact the new maps, you know, there's a prerequisite, I guess, or a threshold to enter the program, and they want an additional foot of freeboard above the floodplain.
Of the 500 or which?
The 100.
100.
So instead, you know, Wisconsin's got like a standard 2 foot above LP, which is 100-year elevation. And this would make that 3 feet essentially. You know, so I've only done a couple of projects in the floodplain. They've all been on the shores of Lake Mendota. One of them is that strange little boathouse property. You know, it's north of Middleton Beach Road, south of Lake Street. And there's maybe 40 units.
Oh, those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So somebody redeveloped one of those and, you know, was forced to essentially raise his floor 2 feet above his neighbors. And it's, you know, it's
He's got a ceiling that's 4 feet. You can't raise the roof.
really difficult. Because they also require a 15-foot buffer that's higher.
Is this because the amount of redevelopment he was doing exceeded the value of the property or
Well,
whatever?
that was like a complete tear down.
Okay.
But yeah, the floodplain actually touches, I think, the north half of all.
But you're allowed to do a certain amount of,
Well, and that's what the Act 175 is.
okay.
I mean, I think that we're talking about that program where extra credit for what they call that in the ordinance. Wow, is that what you're talking about? Us joining? Or
The community rating system is
Yeah.
called, yeah.
Couldn't you grandfather existing buildings
Yes,
so they wouldn't be affected by that? And just have it for any new development?
I think,
right.
Would that be too
Or
cumbersome?
redevelop.
I thought you could grandfather in except unless you do so much value
Right.
improvement to your property. There's a limit to you can.
Yeah, and that's what, I think it's called the 50% rules.
Okay.
If you're gonna,
Yes, I thought there
Equalized
was-
assessed value of the structure.
that's kind of the second question.
Over the lifetime of the structure.
So we're gonna end up with people who may have their buildings now that are touched by the floodplain, say
Right.
like around Esser Pond. And those people were not in the floodplain before. Now they're, if they have a lender, they're gonna be forced to buy flood insurance to protect their property. And so
Yeah.
if we enroll in CRS, what we're getting for them is a discount on insurance rates. That's the point of enrolling in
Yeah.
the CRS.
And you're recommending we do that?
I'm recommending we kick that can down the road right now until we have more time to think about how much staff time it would, use up, and whether or not that carrot or that consolation prize is worth it for, just troubles it might cause, which is what I was bringing up with those boathouses.
So by incorporating the X 175 language, we have not triggered this 1 foot elevation change yet.
No, that would be a requirement of the community rating
That's
system.
gonna be rated. Okay.
Yeah, I'm always concerned that got a 100-year flood now that's up to date of the best estimate we can for the 100-year flood. But as we know, flood peaks are increasing and urbanization's increasing. So that extra foot would give us an extra buffer for.
Yeah, but right now, nobody's even being impacted by this, by our new 100-year flood. That doesn't mean anything to anybody yet, right?
Well, we've been sharing that information.
Yeah, but
So for instance.
banks aren't making somebody get a
No.
insurance.
Correct,
But they don't have it yet.
right.
They don't have it revised.
That's right. That's my point. It's not legal.
So what are you recommending now? We just table this motion for a while?
I recommended a motion to approve including the Act 175 language in the ordinance and not, two separate motions, I suppose.
Mhm.
And not include the CRS program language in the revision. Planning on deferring that until we're ready to approve the flood maps. We'll have to go through the same process
Yeah,
when we
makes sense.
have new flood maps.
So you want a motion to not include the CRS, and it's that'll clarify what we do
Yes.
want. All right. I'll make the motion to include the X 175 language into the new Middleton, or to a revised Middleton floodplain ordinance, chapter 24.
Second.
Or a second?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tom.
Yeah, all in favor of the motion?
Can I ask
Oh.
a question first? I'm sorry. So. So for ordinances without Act 175, and we're proposing that we do have it, and I'm looking at page 124 of the document. If a structure in the floodway is substantially damaged by a flood, it must be removed from the floodway. That to me was like the biggest reason to go with 175.
175.
Because that's a pretty, I think about like how are the property owners who will be impacted by this action, how are they going to react? But seeing that provision made me think they'd probably appreciate having Act 75 incorporated into this so that they don't have to run the risk of their structure being removed. So I'm in
Okay.
favor of.
It,
Do we have, is there anybody with a structure in the floodway in Middleton? Do you know of floodway?
The floodway
I'm
or?
gonna say.
Floodway, which is the moving part of a flooded stream. Yeah,
I'm gonna say no,
yeah, I can't, man,
there might be.
I can't think.
I know there's not one in the creek corridor. Not at the airport. I don't know what the new flood maps would show.
Mhm.
You know, that's the issue we have is south of the railroad tracks,
Mhm.
where the floodplain we currently have is, you know, within the creek. And that's not what
Believe me.
Yeah.
EOR's maps show.
All right.
So your
Okay.
concern is that that should not be in there?
No, I think this is a reason to go with Act 175
Yeah.
to avoid.
But I mean, it sounds like there isn't anything in there that's gonna, at least as of now, but. Is there any more discussion? If not, I'll call the question is. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
You second that? Don?
I did.
That's what I thought. Making sure.
And then we're deferring action on the CRS.
That was in the same motion, wasn't it?
Mm.
No.
Oh, it's too much.
You said two motions.
We follow your direction there. Eric.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
By what you were asking.
trying
You're all-
but you're not helping.
Better read that. That's your performance.
Action on this until when? Would you recommend? Until we have the new flood maps?
Yeah, consider it
Just
as a
years
part of the
away.
flood map
Yeah.
revisions.
Okay, so I move that we postpone action on the CRS until we have updated flood maps.
Second.
All in favor?
Updated FEMA approved flood maps. Is
They
it?
don't exist anymore.
That might be even longer now.
Just in case.
So this is indefinite.
They never happened.
All right.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion's carried.
Number 6.
Number 6 is discussion about the change in their name from
What it
Water
is.
Resource Management and Utility Commission to something else.
I'd like to make a motion.
Apples and
I
bananas.
move to recommend the License and Ordinance Committee and to the Common Council an ordinance change to rename this commission the Water Resources Management Commission.
Second.
Any other discussion?
It would be like
The
the
old
water
name.
utility of
Be like-
Public Works.
Yeah, water utility is a subset of water resource management.
No, I'm talking drinking water utility is part of is under Public
Oh.
Works control.
Oh, yeah.
So it would be the same as that.
We're the board of directors.
Okay.
But
We're the
Yes.
board.
So I asked you this and you have to revise some ordinances. Is that just a slam dunk thing? You just change that one line?
More than one, but it.
Yeah.
we don't have to update.
I'll have to go back and see.
Yeah, go do a search for places.
Well, I mean, much of what the other ordinance that I draft, I think will stay the same, because I think we'll just continue to refer to
Yeah.
the
WRMC.
commission.
Yes.
Well, I suppose we leave it, I could,
yeah, because Matt, you're gonna have to.
yeah, what it's
change-
gonna look like, I don't know exactly, as I
We're
said here.
trying
but I-
to save carpal tunnel syndrome here. Acronym.
Yeah,
Search
no,
the
I thought the whole purpose is so we didn't have to call the committee the worm swamp. Or
Well, then,
even worse, if you know, if
Yeah.
you manage to have everyone use stormwater as a single word, then it's the worm suck.
Yeah.
Which is not,
It's
which is
just
not better.
unwieldy.
So Matt, you're gonna have to go back and change like Conservancy Lands Commission
Yeah,
representative is to Water Resources Management. And
yeah, I mean, there'll be a lot of little puttery stuff to do, but
Water Resource Management Commission or committee? Commission, right?
Commission.
Commission.
And someone
All
will
the,
catch all
all
the
the work it's
numbers
gonna
at
take,
some point.
all the work it's gonna take, Matt, more than be made up for by us not having. this.
Mumbling heavy.
That acronym?
I'm gonna miss it after that.
Oh, it used to be called the Cool Guys Commission.
Okay.
All right, you gonna call the question?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Back to Water Resource Management Commission. Okay, great. Next item of business then,
Numbers
Zero.
7.
number 7. Flood peak. Okay,
All right, hold on.
You're on the warm spot instead.
Yeah,
Let's
it's,
try.
I'm just checking.
I decided to do this. There's been some discussion about, and rightfully so, about the gauging station data we had and the expense and the cost of it. And since last year was a year of quite a bit of rain, and I thought I would look at the records and see some interesting things that occurred that I thought I wanted to share with the committee. So we're looking at the reduction in flood peaks on Pheasant Branch by the county on during 2024. Next slide then.
and you just click on the slide on the left side, Eric.
So this is a map of the, that we all know about the Pheasant Branch watershed, but I guess several people weren't on our committee before and you may not be aware of.
Several, many, oh, more than half, I think.
One person's not on it and Susan too. So essentially this is a watershed. And the diamonds are gauging stations. That's the one at Parmenter Street. That's the South Fork. And the other one's the North Fork. And then you can see that dash line going around. That's the city of Middleton. So it shows you how much of the land is actually in Pheasant Branch watershed. And when I just looked at that, we always think of the South Fork being completely urbanized, but actually this amount of land here is part of that university land that's not urbanized yet.
Yep.
So there is a substantial amount of land that could become
Yeah.
urbanized that could raise the flood peaks or make some changes. And of course, you can look at the North Fork and that's completely out of the urbanized area. Next slide.
Well, and just, I don't want to labor, but Madison's modeling that they presented to us showed what would happen in the future with full development of that land. So,
Well, they don't know how land's going to be developed, whether
well,
it's going to be single family homes or big apartment buildings or.
granted, but given land use scenarios changing from agriculture to development, yeah.
Of course, you're having faith in models too.
Yes, what your point is, why would you doubt them?
Yeah.
Silly boy.
So anyway, this is how last year's precipitation. This is the recorded precipitation at our gauging station at Pheasant Branch at Parmenter Street. And you can see we're up to about 43 inches, and that does gauge does not record precipitation from snow, and we had about 40 inches, so that's another 4 inches or 5. And so we're close to 50 inches during the year. There's been some discussion by Herb raised the question, there's a canopy cover over the gauging station, so we may not be recording the correct rainfall because it doesn't agree with his rain gauge. So I think the city was going to remove some of that. I don't know if that occurred or not. But I compared it to the rain gauge at USGS has on what's the other creek just north of there, and it's real close. Yeah. So next slide.
The tree clearing hadn't happened as of last week, but it may have happened.
Okay, so next year, but it doesn't look like there's a major difference.
Oh, this is the Dorn data.
Yeah, this is the one in Dorn Creek again, right? So we're real close, 45 inches, we get 44. And Dorn Creek gauge is real close to the North Fork. They kind of abut each other. So it's about as close as we get to another rain gauge. So this is the precipitation at Airport Road. When I looked at that, I was impressed by how many flood peaks we had. We have quite a few between the 500 and 700 CFS. That's a lot more than usual, and it's a fairly high number. And also we had some concern during the year about our development on runoff and sediment problems at Red Tail, things like that, which gives you some indication that we've had a lot of floods and they're above the 5-year and 10-year floods. So you can't protect it against everything, and we're probably going to have some damage if you keep on having events like this. And that just clarifies, yeah, we do have some problems because of this heavy rain. So I asked US Todd Stunbeck to do a updated frequency analysis for our North Fork. And so this is a frequency analysis. And I told him to do 2 periods because we had that large flood in 2018 to do two, I'll say one with the 2018 included, and that shows the yellow there, 100-year flood would be 2,120. And if you remove 2018 flood, it's 1030. Now, the recommendation they had from USGS expert is you shouldn't get rid of outliers like that. Although the record's 12 years and they like to have a longer record, but 12 years is it actually, for most people, is pretty darn good to have that. They only remove outliers mainly on the low end because that tilts the upper end if you do that for the rating curve. And so leaving it in there, that's a big difference between the two of them. Now, there was another recommendation that Todd said, well, USGS did recently a flood estimating flood peaks at ungauged areas by regression analysis, and the 2022 updated version came. And so I ran that model. They have a program now called Stream Stats that you could go on and click on a site and it'll give you the 100-year flood. So it's pretty neat if you could find the site, which I had a hard time doing. It took me a half hour.
So you're using models for this? You're using models?
No models. It's a regression model, not a redevelopment model.
That case.
Hey, that's the next slide.
I can't help it.
Oh, so if you look at USGS stream stat estimates, that's 1,120. And Todd said there should be a way to utilize a frequency analysis with the regression, but there really isn't. I looked through both reports and there is no way of doing it. So I said, well, maybe the average is the best estimate. So somewhere between 2120 and 1030 is 1620 is just to give a ballpark. It's probably not realistic to use that with the 2018, and it's not realistic to use the other one. So I think that gives you a fair estimate. Which, if you look at that 700 is the 10-year flood. So what we're seeing is a lot of floods on the North Fork around the 10-year flood. The next slide then. This is the South Fork of Pheasant Branch, and you can see a lot. Peaks are nowhere near as large as they were in the North Fork. Number one, it's a smaller basin, but in the past it is urbanized, and so you tend to get a lot larger flood peaks because of urbanization. But in this case, we're not seeing the same magnitude. So we have the South Pond just upstream for that. So it appears like the South Pond is making a difference.
South Pond's downstream from this.
No, the South Pond is upstream.
This is Deming Way.
Yeah, the South Pond is the inside of the railroad tracks. It's Deming Way.
Oh,
It's Deming Way.
I was thinking of Deming Way
North of
between Middleton and Madison.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Gotcha.
So the next slide. Okay. And doing the same frequency analysis, if you included
That's interesting.
without the 2018, it would be 3230 on the South Fork, and then 1060 with without the 2018 flood. A bigger difference actually.
Is some of that due to what Madison has done in terms of putting in more ponds?
You know, whatever Madison's
Yeah.
doing is part of the recorded values we have.
Yeah.
And so it's not a model. This is actually
Yes,
based on
okay.
recorded information we have.
Is there a way to tell if those ponds are having a good effect?
Madison's ponds or South Pond?
Madison's ponds.
I think Madison doesn't really have all that much on the South Fork. They have some. The biggest one is South
Yeah.
Pond.
Are you talking about the project that,
They're working on it.
Deming?
They're working on the Deming Road project.
Thinking of
in Middleton.
further up where,
Well, Target has a pond. That's in this watershed.
yeah,
Yes.
Target has a pond, but then if you're going down Pleasant View.
Yes, there's a pond over there.
There's more
the highway.
ponds in there that I think they were there, but they've increased them.
But you can't, this is just giving you that period of time. It's not showing you over time what's going on,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And, this is the last 12 years, and a lot of things like Black Hawk has some ponds in that are very substantial. That's already important.
Those have been.
Those have been
enlarged
there.
too.
Yeah.
But they've been there all along. They hadn't,
Yeah, but I think they've made some of them bigger.
I think Susan's right. They did a project
Yes.
to enlarge Swallowtail, is
Yeah.
what I called it.
Mhm. And then,
But yeah, you'd need a
year by
model.
year.
This is just 1 year's
just
worth of
data.
data.
Yeah.
Actual stream flows.
And I didn't do that stream stats on South Pond because it's USGS report for rural areas, not urban areas. So you really can't apply that regression equations to the South Fork. The next slide then. And then this is a Pheasant Branch at Parmenter Street in Middleton. And you can see the maximum we got there is like 400 CFS. So again, it's not as large as we have on the North Fork.
Just a,
And previously, when you combine the two together, we have unusual
Right.
based on North Fork and the South Fork, and they actually peaks are pretty close within an hour or two. So you would expect them to be additive and have a much larger. So
so
if
yes,
you combine the 700 and
Top.
300, we should be getting 1,000, and we're getting
300, yeah.
So that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So next slide, then again, looking at the frequency, now we go back to 1975 when we started our gauging station. So we have a lot of record here. And this is unusual to have this much record to do a frequency analysis. And so 2180 is the one with the new frequency analysis and what we used. And what AR used for their model of our 100-year flood, it was 2150, I believe. So it's pretty close, right on actually, of what we're presently doing. If you get rid of 2018, it's down to 1590, which is unrealistic. So 2018. So in this case, with a longer record, it's more realistic.
Dampens it out.
So the next slide. So if you look at this one, this is the reduction in flood peaks. I got the flood peaks on North Fork. Is the first column, and then the South Fork. And if you combine them together, this is the combined. And then the outflow is really the recorded flow at Parmenter Street. And then I have a column there showing the flood peak reduction by the confluence pond. It varies from 36 up to 76 and down to 17%. So we have an average of like 47%. Now, it varies a lot with floods, whether you have a real intense rainfall or whether it's spread out over a day. And I'm just looking at event daily values over here, precipitation. So you can't always go by the amount of precipitation. Depends on what the ground cover is and the intensity of it. But that just gives you an idea of what the precipitation was. And then I also looked at Doran Creek and showed it's pretty close, except for the one in October was almost a half-inch difference, I guess. So that just gives you an idea. And then I guess I got a summary here. Next one. Oh, I looked at the, I guess I didn't show that, but the USGS stuff has and I didn't show you the error bars on the frequency analysis, but the error bars, I had that table, but the error bars, like on the 100-year flood, they go from like 1,300 to 3,000. So error bars are like the confidence limits, 95% confidence limits. Shows you even with that much data, there's still a lot of variance that could take place. So in summary, 2024 was a wet year with about 50 inches of precipitation. And this resulted in numerous flood peaks. And 4 flood peaks on the North Fork were equal to or greater than the 5 or 25-year recurrence interval. While the South Fork and Pheasant Branch at Parmenter, the flood peaks were about or lower than the 2-year recurrence interval. This shows that the South Pond and Confluence Pond are very effective in lowering flood peaks and preventing potential flood damage. The data analysis shows the Confluence Pond significantly reduced all the flood peaks, and the largest reduction was 77%, with a reduction of 47% on the average. While the operation of the 3 gauge stations is expensive, this is one example of how the data can be used to illustrate the effectiveness of our stormwater management program. And also give us direction, like we have the fees in lieu of, where should we put in our money? Can we enhance South Pond to do better and lower it better? And I think there's maybe opportunities for that. Or look at the North Fork Basin and where we have in the large flood peaks and do something up there. So that's
That's
Just-
great. Yeah, I really like that you added that part at the end. It's not just showing the effectiveness, but it's also helping us figure out what can we do differently elsewhere to improve, you know, to improve that stormwater management. Program.
These peak flow improvements, of course, are only occurring for the portion of the city below the confluence pond, which is the corridor, which is still important and great, but the flooding we have up in Costco or the airport, that's not being managed by confluence pond or being, mitigated.
South Pond made a difference too.
Yeah.
And it's a big deal, not having 10-year floods going down the channel, because that 10-year floods could cause a lot of damage going through Pheasant Branch.
Esther Pond.
Not structural damage, but the channel to the banks and some of our other facilities. So
Is there a way of measuring, because from the South Pond before 2018, there was only that one culvert that was so badly blown out. And now
Yeah.
we've got 3 there. Is that enhancing getting water through in a more?
well, that's below the South Pond. So whatever South Pond does, that's not included. And the culverts are big enough now, so they have no influence on the releases from South Pond.
What I'm saying is that making it less of a dramatic event.
There's no change on it,
Okay.
if I'm understanding your question correctly.
Well, we used to have just one culvert
Right.
that blew out because it got too
We
much
had-
water.
Yeah.
If we had identical storms before and after that pond culvert's outlets got changed with the downstream gauging station at Demingway, South Demingway or North Demingway, might it show some difference in
Yeah.
peak flow from identical rainfall? Now that's all theoretical stuff, but
It depends on the capacity of the culverts on the railroad tracks.
Right.
If they got past that 2018 flood or not. And they just did it and they didn't talk to us or anybody else about what size they're gonna do.
Yeah.
it's railroad guys, you don't ask questions.
They don't care.
They don't.
They're run by Trump. They do it their own.
Back then they were
So
interesting pictures.
How do those numbers on the main stem compare to what we used for the Pheasant Branch, reconstruction and what we gave MSA to set the new pedestrian bridges and all that stuff?
I think it's right on. I think what they used was a thing from BOR, which compared with the gauging station data, 30-year or 21, whatever the 100-year flood was, is the one we use, and the 10. So they should be, I didn't look at the 10, but I think it's almost identical to what we used before. So I think you can show the next slide. I just tossed this one in there. USGS did a report looking at the effect of climate change on flood peaks. And I did a study with her a number of years ago, and we found that flood peaks in Wisconsin were actually decreasing, not increasing. And that was a 40-year period from 1970 to 2010.
Here and here.
And so it looked like flood peaks were decreasing, flood volumes were increasing substantially, and base flow were increasing. And a lot of the changes we saw were because of land use changes were making a big difference. So this study looked at the Sugar River near Broadhead, which is real close. And you could see the annual events were decreasing. This is a non-paramedic distribution. And we have a trend decreasing, but then you see around 2010, now the line starts going up where climate change starts to kick in. So even though we were on a path for decreasing flood peaks because of a lot of agricultural practices and land use change, now climate change appears like it's making a difference. So I guess analysis, a long record is great, but climate change is going to screw things up. So.
Yep.
So next item is discuss items for next meeting.
Yeah.
And we talked about Todd Stundbeck making a presentation that he made a year of wins, but that's not going to be until April, is that right?
Some,
That sounds right, Warren.
Yeah.
we had some stuff we wanted, I mean, is the
What about
ordinance?
Continued discussion of our stormwater ordinance.
Yeah. If we can find time.
You know, fees in lieu increase.
Yeah, definitely the fees have got to be looked at because that had to go through council to increase the fees. I don't remember it happening. That was,
Like,
would have been 17 or 18 years ago.
you actually have the math that's being used right now?
And we've
Yeah.
had a lot of inflation
mean,
since then.
Like supporting math, like.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did you calculate that $6,000 number? You know, you had,
I remember that was all over the board
That's not-
and I remember looking for the decision.
Yep. The seat
water
time.
Resources made. I'm not sure I ever.
Kept it out of the
found
road.
it, But I mean, there is a memo. Just saying.
Change their fees.
Which I was
School
not
districts.
involved in.
do they somehow translate costs for various practices into some kind of dollar for DFS or square foot, cubic foot?
Yeah.
I think it was
Yeah, I
probably, per square foot of facility, maybe.
So that was
Needed.
we discussed at our next meeting, and then also this or Steve Gaffield regarding screening of dental stormwater facilities within the town of Springfield.
All right, so that's what you and I and Jim met with the town of Springfield about.
Oh.
quite a
Get
while
ready
ago.
to give it to.
Yes.
There's been some change or some activity on, oh, I'm sorry, Steve was gonna.
We did a contract amendment for Steve to do like a screening analysis.
That-
And he gave me a draft and I sent it back to him and we decided to take it off this week. Everybody,
So it could be next meeting.
Is there any chance? I hope you don't leave, but. Watching the stormwater ordinance before you
Yeah.
leave. April. Not.
Maybe you should stay until it's done.
That's only 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be an incentive to stick around, wouldn't it? If you can't- Oh, all right, then I'm staying for sure.
I appreciate all the kind words. Very nice.
Well. We're still thinking about it. That's my,
Like you have a place you have to be.
That's true.
And as kind as these words are, they're sincere.
That's sort of sad too, that both of them. Sean and Eric.
Really?
Richard's. That hadn't occurred to you before, huh?
Oh, just right now.
Wait a minute.
No, the remaining engineering staff and office manager Jesse are gonna take
Well,
the brunt of this.
Help me out. If you two leave, is there any engineer, I mean, a PE
No.
on staff?
Well, that's kind of the issue. They split the DPW and the city engineer role, and they're getting a new DPW, which,
Adjourn first?
yeah, you want to adjourn, Warren?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think we should build in time at, looking at with the middle of
Oh,
April
there we go.
meeting.
Sorry about that.
Maybe our next meeting should build it in time at the end for a
Got bills.
celebratory time.
Yeah.
of one kind or another.
Yeah.
That's gonna be, when is that?
Can we have
March.